Good morning, Belfast. You actually showed up for the second day. It's nice to see the large crowd that we have. Today is focused on two of those other ecosystem factors that we talked about. The first is community, and then later on this afternoon, we're going to look at organizational, cultural, structural factors. I think most of you would agree that the criminal justice system doesn't always work as a system. Prisons can be pressured to operate over capacity because we don't make enough use of alternatives. On the other hand, probation and parole can actually become a feeder into prisons because we don't resource those community alternatives well enough, particularly not for some of the prevalent kinds of problems that we see, like substance abuse and the need for forensic care, for example. Now, the Netherlands has decided, they've embarked on a really ambitious initiative to improve the functioning of the entire system as a system, to try to get the best public safety outcomes out of that system, to control the flow into and out of different subsystems of the bigger system. And so today we're going to hear from a very well-qualified team that is working together on this pretty heavy strategic task. Dr. Maaike de Boois, please, did I say it correctly? A sociologist who has been seconded from the Dutch Probation Services to the Ministry of Justice and Security, and Loes Schoenmaker, who has an MSc in Mental Health Services and more than 20 years' experience in prison services and forensic care. And their combined expertise is being focused on how to achieve sustainable structural reforms that can last. And we're fortunate, I think, today to get a preview of the kind of progress that they've made. So I'm going to turn it first, I think, to Dr. Maaike, right? To Loes? Okay, come on up.
Well, thank you, Frank, for the introduction, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Well, my name is Loes Schoenmaker, and I work at the Ministry of Justice and Security in the Netherlands, and I am appointed as the program manager for the current capacity problems in the Netherlands. Fine? Oh, yeah, thanks. So Maaike de Boois and I are working together on this. It's a very challenging but also very interesting assignment. And today we want to share with you where we stand on this assignment and how we look at the issue and the several projects that we have initiated. Let me go to the next slide. This is a short preview of the presentation that we have prepared for you today, and Maaike will take the floor at the third section, and I will come back for the last part. First of all, it's not working. Yes, first of all, I would like to start with some numbers to give you an impression of the Dutch prison system. In the Netherlands, there are 26 prisons on 33 locations, and around 50% of the total capacity is reserved for pre-trial detention. We have an annual inflow of around 27,000 prisoners, and that was in 2023, right before the capacity problem started, and we had to limit the inflow. So right now, in 2024, the annual inflow already dropped to around 22,000 prisoners. At the moment, the Dutch prison service has over 10,000 beds, and around 45% of those beds is situated in a double cell, and this is also the maximum design capacity of our double cells. And the average duration upon outflow is 5 months, so the prisoners stay fairly short with us. About 64% of the prisoners has a sentence up to 3 months. So when we talk about short sentences, we really mean short up to 3 months. And last but not least, we have a fairly low detention ratio compared to other European countries, and it's only around 45 prisoners per each 100,000 inhabitants. So I hope that these numbers give you somewhat of an impression of the Dutch prison system, and now I would like to move on to the problems that we are facing. In the end of 2023, the capacity shortage became visible when staff problems caused the closure of several units within multiple prisons. But that was not the only reason. We also had capacity shortage in the forensic psychiatric institutions and in the juvenile prisons. So around 250 of those convicts remained within the prison system for adults. And that has led to extra pressure on the capacity. The occupancy rate within the prisons for males is over 99%, and it's been like that for the last year. And we also use police cells to place our prisoners there, but that's just a temporary solution because the police want their cells back. But fortunately, we were not forced to put extra mattresses on the floor in our cells, but there has been some discussion about that in the parliament. So far, so good. So in December 2023, we needed to take some short-term measures, and the first measures we took was to let convicts with a low risk wait before they can serve their sentence. But this has led to a substantial waiting list, and right now there are about 8,000 people waiting on this to serve their sentence. And we also took measures to increase the outflow. We took the first one in March 2024, and prisoners with a sentence up to 1 year were released early under electronic monitoring. However, by the end of the year, a motion passed in the parliament to stop this form of early release. So we had to come up with something else. And right now, we increase the outflow by sending all prisoners away 5 days early. And we are preparing to extend this to a maximum of 2 weeks. And again, this will only be for prisoners with a sentence up to 1 year. And it was very difficult to achieve a majority in the parliament for this measure. And it's interesting that the support for this measure in the end came from the opposition parties and not the coalition. So it's an interesting conversation between our Secretary of State and her own party and the parliament. But now we are preparing the necessary legislation, and we expect that it will come into effect around the summer. And of course, in the meantime, the prison system has looked at all the opportunities to expand the capacity. And right now, arrangements are made to put some old buildings back in use. And also container prisons are examined. But the expansion must be done within the current budget because our government recently decided not to provide any additional funding for the capacity problems that we're facing. This means that there's only funding for some small facilities of around 30 or 40 cells. And 2 of these facilities will be put into use later this year. So this is in broad terms what we have done on the short term. But when we look at the long term, we expect a continuing imbalance between the demand and the supply of capacity. We are already in a period of increasing demand due to longer sentences, and on top of this, our government that started last year has the political desire for even longer sentences. But as I just said, we are also facing a lack of funding, not only for the expansion of capacity, but also for the necessary renovations. And if we do not renovate a part of our prisons in the next 5 years, we will have to close down about 4,000 cells. So that's a huge part of our current capacity. So all the reasons that we need structural measures to deal with this imbalance and all these uncertainties. And due to the scale of the problem, we expect that we will need different types of measures that focus on the entire criminal justice chain, because the problem is simply too big for the prison system to solve it by itself. So this is where Maaike and I came in. We started a program and we have the assignment how to manage the prison capacity in the coming decade. And as I said before, we work together with the entire criminal justice chain and also with certain researchers and strategic advisors, because to get some extra support on this difficult task. We started our program with an ambition for these measures, because we see that demographic developments will lead to a higher demand within the next 10 years. And considering this, we will have to find ways to provide more cells than we do now. But we also think it's important that we will be able to respond to fluctuations in demand, and that the system will be able to scale up and scale down. And right now we are in times of high demand, but we know that this will change in the future. We just don't know when that will happen. And finally, we want the measures to contribute to effective sanctions, because we do not want the measures to focus exclusively on efficiency and have a negative impact on the important role of the prison system in bringing back prisoners into the community. So, to come up with these structural measures, we have initiated some projects. First of all, a historical system analysis is carried out to find out how we got into this situation. And in this, we look back for 25 years and hope to learn some lessons for the future. And secondly, we draw up some future scenarios that consist of certainties and uncertainties. And by weighing potential measures in each scenario, we try to come to reasoned sets of measures. And finally, the potential measures are tested and discussed in the criminal justice chain, but we will also test them against academic insights and experiences in other countries. And that's also why we're very happy to be here today and yesterday and hear about all of your interesting work. These projects are still work in progress, and today we would like to share where we stand. And Maaike will now tell you some more about the historical system analysis and the future scenarios.
Thank you very much. As Loes was saying, we're having a problem. In recent decades, the need of and supply for detention capacity in the Netherlands has gone through phases of increase and decrease. And in order to give a solid advice towards the future to manage the capacity of the prison system, we need a retrospective of previous problems regarding capacity related to previous developments and choices. By this, we can learn lessons for the future to better balance the supply and demand of our capacity of the prison system. For this, we are working together with the Dutch Institute of Research, TNO, to perform a historic system analysis. And the aim of the historic system analysis is to contribute to effective capacity management in the Netherlands by providing insight into historical shortages and surpluses and into underlying factors that cause those fluctuations. In doing so, we examine the demand and supply of the prison system, including relevant social development and political and policy choices that we've made in the past and that influence the capacity. To understand the capacity problem, knowledge about inflow and outflow into prison is important. These are developments in the broader sanction chain and in the developments in the imposition of sanctions in general. There's a lot of quantitative research about and data about inflow and outflow of prisoners, but the relationship between policy choices, developments within society, developments within criminal justice system, developments in the prison system, and inflow and outflow have not yet been mapped out. Today I will only give you an initial insight of some of our findings. There's much more to share really, but we won't do that today because of the time also, and also because of the process of our analysis. The final result of the historic system analysis is going to be a written report, but also, and I think you might find this interesting, a model. And in this model, you will see the factors individually and in combination, and how they influence capacity and to what extent they do so. Because we wanted to be able to draw lessons for the future, for instance, on what factors is most useful to intervene, and also which combination of factors has the greatest impact on capacity and ensures the manageability of the prison system in the long run. Yes, thank you. Oh, good. Without further interruptions, let me tell you about this. We've established now four clusters of factors, I should say. This is not definite, but this is where we stand now. So maybe in a year you will see our report and think there's 5 clusters, but for now we have 4 clusters. And the first cluster is criminal justice chain dependencies, which includes the factors developments in crime and investigations, developments in prosecution and imposition, developments in years of detention, sentence length, amount of sentences, and special sanctions. Then we have a cluster about assignment and financing. The factors there that we now have are the statutory assignment and the objective of executing custodial sentences, the changeability in the assignment of the prison system. I don't know if you recognized it, but in the Netherlands we sometimes add some assignments to the prison system, and the financing of the assignment of the prison system. We have a cluster execution of custodial sanctions, where the factors developments in the prison population and placement of the populations are involved. And we have a cluster about the capacity of detention, where we talk about occupancy and how to determine the required capacity and the usable and unusable capacity of our prison system and personnel. For today, I've chosen 3 factors to discuss, and I base my choice on hopefully the recognizability of those factors in other countries. From the cluster criminal justice chain dependency, I will go into the developments in the number of sentences, the sentence length, and the years of detention. And I will also go into an example of drugs offenses. Then from the cluster execution of custodial sanctions, I will go into the development of the prison population and the regimes. From the cluster capacity, I will go into occupancy. And today I won't be discussing the cluster assignment and financing. By this, I do greatly injustice to the importance of this cluster. But I've chosen not to discuss it because of the very Dutch character of our financial structure of the prison system and the assignment, that it wouldn't be easy to be translated into a short presentation towards other countries. Next, please. Yes, thank you very much. Good. The first 2 sheets that I'm going to show are about the demand that we put on prison capacity. What do we ask from our prison services? Here we see the number of custodial sanctions and the length of detention. In the first sheet here, you see the number of custodial sanctions in the green line below. And in the blue line, it shows the number of days in detention. And what is striking in this figure is that the number of custodial sanctions is currently at a rather low point, while I'm going to see if I can, here, is at a rather low point. Here I should point actually, while the number of days is rising. After a period of relative stability, here, let me see. Here, after a period of relative stability, followed by a decrease, we've seen an average length of the prison sentence increase since 2016. And this is, sorry, it's a bit hard to see around here. At the same time, the number of sentences imposed has been decreasing, but From 2020 onward, you also see that the number of imposed sentences is increasing slowly here. So not only are we now punishing longer, but we are also having more sentences. Both factors have an impact on prison capacity, but in a different pace. Longer sentences take longer to have an effect on capacity than a direct rise of the amount of custodial sanctions. So since the number of days, the increase of the number of days stems from 2016 onward, it is understandable that we are slowly but surely being confronted with their effect on prison capacity, because people are staying longer in prison, so they're still there in a way. An increasing sentence length for certain types of crimes will put an extreme pressure, or can put an extreme pressure, on our prison capacity. We will talk about drugs offenses in a little bit. I know in a lot of countries the sentence length for drug offenses is rising, or has been rising over the years, and this is why I have chosen this example. But let's first quickly look at what happens when the number of sentences rises. Then you see a rather direct effect on prison capacity. So knowing this, let's look at the drug offenses, what happens. Next slide, please. Good. We're looking at one type of crime now, the drugs offenses, and you see the following. The graph starts in 2000 and ends at 2022. As I was saying, work in progress, and we're still working on the last numbers, but it gives you an idea. And in this picture, we've added the years of detention in purple, the purple bars below. The purple bars below, the years of detention, is the result of the amount of custodial sanctions in blue and the length of the sentence in orange. What you see here is a decrease in the amount of sentences for drug offenses. So we have, let me point this out, in the blue. So we can definitely say this is a decrease, I think. What you also see is a rise in length of sentences. Well, this is certainly a rise. I'm curious to hear about your countries and what you see there. Well, then you see also, of course, a rise in years of detention, because if you have a lot of days of detention, then you will end up, and you have an amount of sentences, you will end up in a certain amount of years. So the rise of years of detention is putting a strain on our prison capacity. And while this figure only illustrates the developments for drug offenses, and those are relatively small numbers of the total of custodial sanctions, they have a great impact on our prison system and is considerable. So these two sheets were on the demand side. What do we ask from prison capacity? And now we're going to have a quick look at the supply side of prison capacity. What do prison have to offer in the last 20 years? So next sheet, please. Well, the title already tells it all, basically. This is the summary. There has been a shrinking in light and extramural regimes, and there has been a growth of special target groups in our prison system. Let's have a quick look at our graph. The green line here. Those are the people in light regimes, for instance, in halfway houses. So those are the people that can, for instance, go out to work and then sleep in a low security facility in the night. You see an enormous decrease here in this capacity. Up to here, almost zero. Lots of halfway houses have been closed in the last years. You see that we're reopening them here, but not so much yet. let me remind you that this population has not disappeared. The regime has disappeared. So the population is in general just a normal prison, which is more expensive. The black line here shows the people that are extramural. So, for instance, because they're on conditional release, with or without an ankle bracelet, and due to a change of law here, you see an enormous decrease. I know that in some countries this is not part of the prison population when you're on conditional release. In the Netherlands it is. We count them as prison population. So this might be a bit confusing because it's just very different in the Netherlands perhaps than in your own country. There was a change in law that we didn't let people out after 2/3 of their sentence, and there you see that they are, that's why there's a decrease. Well, as you can imagine, those people stay in prison longer because they're not in halfway houses and they're not on conditional release. We are still hoping that they can serve in community-based sentences, but so far they are just in prison. And the red line that we have here, is a fraction of the total prison population that is in special need facilities or in prison psychiatric centra. They are people that mostly need extra care and can't be in a 2-person cell. So not only makes this group a larger portion of the total prison population, but also it is a group that is more demanding on the capacity of places and personnel and specialized personnel. Here, maybe you didn't see it, but I have a little orange line here, and this little orange line are our new regimes. For instance, a very high security facility that we're having and a terrorism unit. So this sheet makes you wonder whether the population of our prisons has changed, whether the regimes have changed, or whether the acceptance of risk in society have changed. Next sheet, please. This is my final sheet on the supply side, and here we talk about capacity occupancy of prisons. Here you can see in the sheet what capacity is available and what is being used. The black line shows the available capacity here. And the red and orange line, I put them together just because of the short presentation, is what is being used. As you can see, the black and the red lines are nearing each other towards 2022 here. And you already knew that we currently have a bigger demand than supply in the Dutch prison system. For the Netherlands, I think Loes already mentioned that. We have a waiting list. We don't take people in, so we don't call it overcrowding. This is why we call it capacity problems. So the lines will never cross in the Netherlands because they're just outside. They're less visible in this graph. The green line shows the capacity that's really usable. Loes already quickly mentioned something about that. This is the result of postponing renovation and other causes. For instance, that there is no personnel to occupy those places. So this means that there are certain cells that we have that we count as capacity but are not directly usable. So it takes a little bit of time to make them operationable. And this means that we are not as flexible with our capacity as you would think based on the capacity that is officially mentioned. Prognosis do tell us, though, that that prison population always shrinks or grows, but because also of long-term renting contracts and employment laws, we are not so flexible as well. So these are the problems or the situation in our capacity, what prison has to offer. Let's go to some observation is in the next sheet, please. So coming back to the clusters. Coming back to the clusters, what we see, and this is a bit more than I just showed, but what we see is that in the criminal justice dependencies, that the capacity in the prison system has a strong dependency on other activities in the criminal justice chain or other choices of the criminal justice chain. They are sometimes not directly visible, but take time to come to light. Prison capacity and execution are not consistently factored into chain-wide decisions. So the demand can come somewhat as a surprise result after implementing new policies or laws. For instance, a new focus on a particular crime or raising the length of a sentence, thinking about capacity of the prison system is not always being done in front of the decision. Before the decision. The second cluster, assignment and financing. What we know is assignment and financing is planned, but crime, years of detention, sentence length, types of sanctions are very unpredictable and influenced by many factors, including politics. In the cluster execution of custodial sanctions, we know, we see that reducing low security regime has put a strain on the prison capacity, as does the population with extra needs. In the cluster capacity of the we see that the capacity of the prison system is only flexible to a limited extent. In addition, incorporating flexibility involves costs, because empty prisons are very expensive and usually they don't stay open for years after years after years waiting for prisoners. You may remember that we rented out some prisons and then we closed them. And this makes it difficult, though, to promptly react to changes in the demand. And by scaling up, and it's very difficult to scale up or down capacity. Good. Can I see the next? No. The next, please. Yeah. Yes, thank you. This one. Yeah. Sorry about that. We've just spoken about some underlying factors of capacity of the prison system, and here you see them all in an overview. On the left side, you see the demand that we've been discussing here. This is all demand, and this is supply. On the demand side, you see the factors of influence, for instance, prosecution and trial, of course also crime, years of detention, as a result of the amount of sentences and the years of the days of detention, the amount of sentences, the length of the sentence, and the complexity of the population have put a strain on our problem in the middle here. So from the demand side, you see that we are putting a strain on prison capacity. Then also, I've been talking a bit about the supply side. We've been talking about the available capacity, not only in buildings, but also in personnel and in real available capacity that you can use right away. And what we also saw that in the last years, we have limited what prison had to offer. So we limited the low security facilities and we had an unusable capacity as well. I've not talked about finances too much, it is on the right side, but we should really take those into consideration when talking about managing the prison capacity in a sustainable way with a 10-year horizon. Not only are those factors that are underlying under the problem of prison capacity, but perhaps there also are leverage points on which we can intervene to manage the prison capacity in the long run. What I've shown is how we've been looking at the past, but we are also in a similar way looking towards the future. This means that we are weighing those factors that you see here towards possible futures. And the future holds some certainties and uncertainties. From that, we are making scenarios, and I will talk about 2 scenarios for the future now. Can I see my next slide, please? Yeah. Okay. This is a range of possible futures. You can, I think, if you sit down and talk about it, you can come up with 150 possible scenarios for the future. But I am showing you two extreme ones also. And the idea is to think about what will happen if crime will decrease enormously. We have used past information to make an estimate about the future. So we have looked at the all-time low crime rate and compared that to the prison capacity, and now we've calculated that into a future. And what you would come up with in an extreme future like this, prison capacity could be half of what it is now. Another extreme future is that we have explored is what if crime rises enormously? Also, we've looked at the all-time high and related this to prison capacity, and we've come up with the conclusion that if there would be a big rise of crime, prison capacity could be 3 times the volume that we have currently. Next slide, please. For each factor of influence and future outlook, we can ask ourselves the following strategic questions to arrive at appropriate packages of measures on the long run. We can say avert. Is this a future you want to prevent? And what measures can you take to do so? Cope. If we cannot or do not want to avert this future scenario, what measures do we need to be able to cope with this future? Accept. If we cannot cope this future and we cannot avert it, are we prepared to accept the consequences? And to make it very clear, if there's a worst case scenario and we need 3 times as much prison capacity than we have now, it is not a feasible situation. We definitely need to prevent this from happening. Next sheet, please. So to come to our advice on structural measures or options that we can contemplate, we've tried to understand the past, the current and the future situation as thoroughly as we can. As Loes explained, we've analyzed the capacity problem, the imbalance between supply and demand. We've researched the causes of the problem, the historic system analysis. We've analyzed what may lie ahead with the future scenarios, and we have a set of factors to take into account when we want to achieve our goals. And our main goals are that the criminal justice chain has sufficient capacity and flexibility to effectively execute custodial sanctions. Based on this, we are designing structural measures, how to influence the demand, how to influence the supply of the prison capacity, what are our leverage points. And this brings us to the options that we see for managing prison capacity in the coming 10 years. And Loes will tell you more about that.
Yes, and I will try to do that very quickly because we have only about 15 minutes left. So could I get the next slide, please? Well, as Maaike has shown, in the context analysis, there are several leverage points to influence the demand for prison capacity. And at this slide, I show you the leverage points that we are thinking of to manage the capacity. First of all, we would like to address the importance of prevention as a way to limit the inflow in the criminal justice chain. We believe that investing in housing, debt problems, mental health care is crucial to prevent crime. And of course, this is not only in the hands of the Ministry of Justice, but we want to contribute to a broad discussion on how to prevent criminality. For other ways to restrict the inflow, we look at alternatives for short sentences and pretrial detention. Some alternatives are already under discussion in the Parliament, and there seems to be some support for electronic monitoring. But besides this, we also look at the opportunities to increase the success rate of community service sanctions and fines, because when these fail, they will be converted into a prison sentence. And to promote the outflow, we look at ways to expand the possibilities to bring prisoners back to community gradually. As Maaike has already said, these possibilities were restricted about 5 years ago by new legislation, and we think it's important to bring those possibilities back. And this will not only benefit the capacity, but it will also benefit the task of reintegrating prisoners. And also, as Maaike has shown, in the Dutch prisons, there is a large group of prisoners that needs extra mental health care, and we are examining the possibilities to place these prisoners in forensic care for the last part of their sentence. With these measures, we think it's possible to lower the demand for prison capacity. And as I said before, we know from the past that the demand in capacity will fluctuate over time. And at this moment, there's no flexibility left in the system. As I said before, all the double cells are in use and there are very little opportunities to scale up. And besides this, there's no legislation available that enables the involved agencies to take measures in times of need and convert prison sentences to, for example, in home detention. We are now looking at the role of home detention, electronic monitoring, and supervision by the probation service to promote the outflow in times of need. Because the measures that we have taken right now, it took us about 6 months to get them through Parliament and into effect. So that's time that we simply don't have in times of capacity shortage. But as Maaike has shown, there are also some options on the supply side. The Dutch prison system is looking at new detention concepts, and an important development is the concept that requires less staff and give more autonomy to the prisoners. Maaike mentioned the example of prisoners going outside to work and come back at the end of the day to sleep inside. This is some of the possibilities that the prison system is looking at right now, and they're also looking at the possibilities that innovation might bring. And of course, an obvious measure would be to increase capacity, but as I said before, there's no funding right now for large-scale expansion, so that's why right now we are focusing on small-scale expansions. And also, we look at facilities with a low security level, so less staff will be needed. Could I get the next slide? Thanks. In the next months, Maaike and I will start weighing these options, and we have put up some criteria for this. And as Maaike just said, we want the options to contribute to 3 aspects. That is, of course, the capacity problem, the possibilities to respond to fluctuations in demand, and the effective execution of sanctions. The others are pretty clear. Of course, we need to know if and how long it takes before an option might have the desired effect, and we also want to know if options have unwanted side effects. And for this, we also involve experiences from other countries. And that's why we are in contact with around 8 European countries, and we share all the capacity issues in these countries, but also the experiences in the measures that are taken. And of course, we need to know what costs are involved with each measure. And if possible, we also want to quantify the benefits of each option. This can also concern the benefits for society and not just financially. And finally, we need to know if the involved agencies are able to execute the measures. And this is also relevant to find out if the several options form a logical whole. Well, I expect that we will be able to put up a wise and well-founded advice in the next months. But of course, after this, it's in the hands of our Secretary of State and the Parliament that she has to discuss each measure with. Well, this is where we stand for now and all we can share. And thank you for your attention. Thanks.
You guys can stand up if you want, and I need the microphone, right? So, pretty sophisticated analysis, really impressive in a lot of ways. I'm sure there's questions, right? We have time for a few questions. I can't see, but if anybody's putting their hands up, right there.
Yeah, hi, it's Rob Allen from the UK. Thank you very much. That was a terrific presentation. I wish we were doing something as sophisticated and long-term as that, but as you know, we are struggling kind of short-term at the moment. I had just a couple of questions. You mentioned 8,000 people in a queue waiting to go to prison. Can you tell us a little bit about how you select those people who have a prison sentence who are then permitted to wait?
Yes.
And the second one was about foreign nationals. You didn't mention that. When I looked at it, you used to have about 25% or more foreign nationals in your prison system. Is there any initiatives to transfer these to other countries? I know the EU has got various transfer agreements and all that. Does that make any difference, or is that a bit of a dead letter?
Maybe to start with the last question, we have looked into that because there are, of course, prisoners from other countries in our prison system, and we have looked at the possibilities to increase the outplacement to their own countries. But when we look at the sentences they have, well, the upbringing is not as big as we would like. So if we look at the necessary investment to get them transferred to other countries, it doesn't weigh up to the upbringing.
It's not worth it, in other words.
Yeah. The waiting list, yes, that's interesting. We have different ways of prisoners coming into the Dutch prison system. A part of the prisoners is of course already in remand, so they are not, will not qualify to be on a waiting list. But another part of the prisoners can stay at home when the trial is going on, and when they're convicted, it's possible that they get a qualification that they are at low risk and they can wait at home to serve their sentence. And we're just not calling in these prisoners. And on the other hand, we have also asked the police not to be too ambitious with people with a sentence under 60 days. So the police are not actively picking up people with short sentences. And that explains the waiting list.
Thank you. Right there. Faye.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation. I'm wondering, you mentioned that the length of sentences is increasing in the Netherlands, and I'm wondering if there were certain populations that's occurring with, or certain crime categories, and what the potential might be of helping people see that may not be the best solution. We've learned in the United States that the capacity is the number of people coming in and how long they're staying. And some of our states have been much more successful in reducing the length of sentences as a way of controlling populations. But I was curious, from your perspective, what the options might be in the Netherlands in terms of the length of sentences.
Well, what we see is in general a rise in length of sentences, and for specific offenses you see it more. I think this is very globally the vision that we now have. And what I explained is that it really puts a lot of strain on prison capacity, so it's something to be wary about. This is also why we've formed an international round table. There's some members here today to discuss how to tell a strategic story about please not raising the sentence length if you're facing capacity problems. It is a very difficult discussion to have because you start to talk about feelings of longer sentences are better for society, but they're really not. So it will take time to really be very thorough in this discussion, and we take little steps, and by working together and also being here today, we hope that together we can share the story that the sentence length is really imposing a lot of strain on our prisons.
While you guys work so hard trying to figure all these things out, conservative government can undo your work so quickly by just passing legislation that makes no sense, right? I'm wondering, have you thought of any strategies to try to avoid that from happening?
It's difficult. We can't
Of course.
Is it working? Yeah, we can't always prevent it from happening. But I think that we are very lucky right now that our Secretary of State is very much on our team. Yeah, she will do anything that she can to prevent more strain on the system. And that has caused her some big fights with her own party. So she's really doing the best she can. And that's all we can hope for.
Well, and I think to add to Loes, that it also helps for us that we have a 10-year horizon. So we are not stuck to a political reality at this moment, that
Right.
our options need to be sustainable for a longer period of time than government is or than parliament is.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question we have time for, I think. Come on, guys. Okay.
Thank you so much, Loes and Maaike, for the very good overview of the Dutch system and the past and the future possibilities and challenges. So I have a question regarding, I live in the Netherlands since a few years, as you know, and we being a Swedish person, observing the Dutch drug policy, it's a very interesting project, so to say, and as you mentioned, there is a rise in sentencing of drug offenses. So I'm just curious, like, how you perceive that development in reflection of the Dutch drug policy, and if there's any, let's say, openings there to actually treat that more of a public health issue rather than a punitive issue. Thank you.
Well,
That's a big one, right?
yeah, that's a big one and a difficult question, because I think the political climate right now is just not open to really look at these drug crimes and drug problems in a very different way. So I'm not very hopeful on that, to be honest.
No, and I was in Indonesia not too long ago, and there they have very, very severe sanctions for drug use even, but they are now, and that results in a lot of strain on the prison capacity and enormous overcrowding, as are in other countries in Southeast Asia. And what they are saying, well, they are concluding, well, this really doesn't work too well for us. So in other parts of the world, you see a different direction people are taking. So I'm very intrigued by that. So we will wait and see what happens and contribute as much as we can to the right direction.
Yeah. I want to commend you guys for the work you're doing. It's you know, we always play catch up in corrections. We're always trying to catch up in all these pressures on us, and I think you're at least doing the kind of analysis that's needed to show what the consequences are for some of the decisions that we make. So I really commend you, and thank you very much. Let's do it.